When the shout of "cut" echoes and the studio lights fade to black, a different kind of movie truly begins, a film with no audience, no script, and one that was never intended for release. It is the life of the silver screen gods, those whose slightest frown could make millions of hearts flutter, yet who never once felt free to hold the hand of the person they loved while walking down a city street. Most expensive role they ever played. They didn't hide out of shame, but were fighting a lonely battle to survive within a system that viewed one's true self as poison to the box office. From the hidden ashes of Dirk Bogarde to the unsent letters of Paul Newman, we will turn back the pages of files covered in the dust of time. Below are 10 legends who carried their life secrets to the grave, not to conceal a stain, but to protect a final shred of freedom amidst the cruel glare of stardom. Step behind the curtain where secrets are only revealed once the stage lights have long receded into the past. In the list below, which legend story moves you the most? Please share your thoughts with us. 1. Rock Hudson, when a god must learn to be human.
To stardom.
What would you do if the entire world worshipped you as the ultimate icon of masculinity, but that very worship became the iron cage that imprisoned your soul? Rawr. Hudson was not just a star. He was a definition. Standing 6'4" with a chiseled face and sturdy shoulders, Hudson was the god of 1950s Hollywood, the man every woman craved and every man aspired to be. But there was a grim reality. The greatest role of his life was not found in the frames of Giant or Pillow Talk, but in the role of Rock Hudson in the real world. His career was the product of a star-making laboratory under the hand of powerful agent Henry Wilson. Wilson did more than just change the ordinary name Merle Johnson Jr. to Rock Hudson. He forced him to eradicate every sensitive trace of his personality. Hudson had to learn to walk with absolute decisiveness and laugh with just enough charm while maintaining a cool exterior. According to many behind-the-scenes accounts, whenever the cameras stopped rolling, Hudson would fall into a state of profound loneliness. He had sincere loves, such as his years-long relationship with Lee Garlington, but it all had to take place in unlit rooms behind locked doors that not even the house staff were permitted to enter. To protect this money-making machine, the studio orchestrated one of the greatest deceptive plays in entertainment history, the 1955 marriage to Phyllis Gates. The public at the time was enamored by this model love story, but in reality it was a cold PR contract aimed at silencing rumors about Hudson's true sexuality that were buzzing through the industry. In her memoir, My Husband Rock, Hudson, 1987, Phyllis revealed a painful glimpse of a husband living in constant fear of exposure, a man forced to use his entire marriage as a shield for his fame. Hudson did not resent women. He simply could not love them in the way Hollywood compelled him to perform. The tragedy of Hudson only truly came to light in 1985, when AIDS began to ravage the face once considered the most perfect in the world. The image of a frail, emaciated Rock Hudson appearing on television sent shockwaves through America. At that time, AIDS was more of a moral sentence than a medical condition. The initial indifference from close friends at the White House, the Reagans, pushed Hudson to the brink. But in that dark moment, Hudson did something braver than all his heroic roles combined. He chose to acknowledge it. Rock Hudson's admission was not a confession of guilt, but a heart-wrenching cry of a man tired of living a lie. As he took his final breath, the mask of Hollywood shattered. Many cultural historians believe that without Hudson's death, the world might have taken decades longer to face HIV/AIDS with empathy rather than stigma. Rock Hudson lived as a god on borrowed glory, but he died as a true human being, one who used his pain to pave the way for the truth to be heard. As the ghost of repression in Rock Hudson's story gradually fades, we transition to another chapter of Hollywood, a place where elegance was not just a demeanor, but a flawless armor polished to a mirror finish. 2. Cary Grant, Bachelor Hall and Tears. behind the suave smile.
11 once, we'll say 12.
The moment Cary Grant stood before the mirror adjusting his silk tie knot with millimeter precision before stepping onto the red carpet, no one saw a human being. They only saw a product refined to absolute perfection. But behind that glamour was Archibald Leach. His birth name, a poor boy from Bristol who had hand-carved Cary Grant into an iron mask. The tragedy began when this mask became so magnificent that the world refused to accept any cracks behind it. Grant once cried out during a bout of depression, "Everyone wants to be Cary Grant. Even I want to be Cary Grant." This was not an act of vanity, but a heart-wrenching cry of a man realizing he was imprisoned within his own brilliance. At the Bachelor Hall Villa on the coast of Santa Monica, Grant and actor Randolph Scott lived together for 12 years. Behind those closed doors, away from stiff silk suits and industrial smiles, there were only two men who found true peace. Rare, non-public archival photographs captured Grant wearing an apron, laughing radiantly, while cooking with Scott, a face of natural happiness that no Hollywood film ever possessed. However, for the studio moguls of that era, this quiet happiness was poison to the box office. The Hollywood machine immediately went into overdrive to eliminate the truth. They forced Grant into lavender marriages, marriage of convenience, and staged fake dates in the press with foreign starlets, just to silence the whispers about two men living too closely. Every time Grant married and divorced, the public craved him even more. Yet few could sense the sorrow of a man forced to abandon the one he truly loved to satisfy morality contracts. He lived in constant vigilance, fully understanding the cruel rules of the game for Cary Grant to live. Archibald Leach had to die a little more each day. Grant's pain was the loneliness of one who remained painfully aware. According to researchers in the biography, A Brilliant Disguise, 2020, he turned to psychological therapies and even potent hallucinogens in an attempt to rediscover the self that had been buried. He questioned his own worth, wondering if the world loved the real him or was merely worshiping an illusion he carried on his shoulders. The truth of his sexuality did not fit into simple labels like gay or straight, but lay in a painful gray area where love was crushed by the expectations of millions. Even though his daughter later made efforts to protect her father's image, posthumous records still paint a somber truth. Cary Grant died while still playing the role of himself. He carried the secrets of his years in Santa Monica to the grave, as the only way to preserve a final shred of dignity. Cary Grant passed away in 1986, maintaining his elegance until his very last breath. But his heart perhaps remained forever trapped at Bachelor Hall, the only place where he was permitted to hold the hand of the one he loved without fearing the judgment of the spotlight. If Cary Grant was a perfect crystal that allowed no cracks to show in the light, the next man was a shattered soul who let the real scars on his face tell the story of repressed pain. 3. Montgomery Clift, the scars on the most beautiful face in the world.
They last.
One night in 1956, Montgomery Clift's car slammed into a telephone pole after leaving a party at Elizabeth Taylor's house. When Taylor arrived at the scene, she intervened just in time to prevent Clift from falling into a life-threatening condition. Clift survived, but the face once dubbed the most beautiful in the world was permanently disfigured. However, to those closest to him, that accident was merely the physical manifestation of spiritual scars that had been smoldering inside him for a very long time. While Cary Grant learned to live in peace with his mask, Montgomery Clift was eroded by his own mask day by day. Clift was not just an actor. He was an artist who worshipped absolute truth in acting. Cruelly, his private life was forced to exist within a prolonged denial. He was gay, a truth that in the 1950s was considered the end of any peak career. In psychiatric interview records released later, Clift once choked back tears to admit, "I am gay. I am not ashamed, but I am truly afraid." That fear did not stem from himself, but from a Hollywood system ready to discard anyone who did not comply with the archetypes it had built. Clift's pain was not merely a personal sorrow, but a prolonged physical and mental decline. Following the accident, he turned to alcohol and painkillers not just to cope with bodily agony, but to numb the torment of maintaining the image of a heterosexual, silver screen lover, while his true emotional life was forbidden from existing openly. Elizabeth Taylor, his closest friend and the keeper of his greatest secrets, repeatedly had to use her immense star power to protect Clift from the growing coldness of the studios, who realized their money-making machine was no longer perfect and was beginning to deviate from their desired standards. A detail seldom mentioned is that at the 2000 GLAAD Awards, Elizabeth Taylor called Montgomery Clift the bravest gay man I ever knew. That bravery did not lie in public disclosure, but in his struggle to preserve his artistic dignity and personal integrity in an era that still viewed homosexuality as a deviance to be hidden or corrected. In his final years, Clift lived in seclusion, as the fading Hollywood glamour could no longer shield him from prolonged episodes of depression. Montgomery Clift passed away at the age of 45 after a process of physical and mental exhaustion that many film historians now regard as one of the longest tragedies in classical Hollywood. On the night he left us, Clift was alone with no family of his own and no public recognition of his true self. Thus, the story of Montgomery Clift is not a scandal to be exposed, but a belated sigh for a talent who paid too high a price, using his own beauty and soul to feed an illusion for the public, only to face utter solitude when the stage lights finally went out. The silent self-destruction of Montgomery Clift closes like a somber note, leaving a void for another tragedy, no less haunting one, where a talented soul spent a lifetime trying to fix himself in vain. 4. Anthony Perkins. A sentence labeled Pathology and the Silent War. Many are still haunted by the cold gaze of Norman Bates in the masterpiece Psycho, but few know that those eyes contained the very real fear of Anthony Perkins himself. If Hollywood was once a heaven for dreams for Perkins, it was an unofficial courtroom where his personal identity was judged as a disease that needed to be eradicated. Instead of being free to pursue happiness, he spent most of his life engaged in a grueling battle to change his inner nature, driven solely by the pressure of the studio system and the rigid moral codes of the time. Anthony Perkins's pain stemmed from a misguided belief that his true sexuality was a defect requiring a cure. According to many private chronicles, he underwent harsh psychological therapies attempting to force himself into the mold of a model heterosexual to maintain his A-list star status. This repression was so profound that he lived in a state of constant anxiety, fearing that a single gesture or a slip of the tongue would cause everything to collapse. His deep but silent romance with actor Tab Hunter was a secret that Paramount used all its power to suppress, even resorting to threats to keep them in the shadows. The complexity of Perkins' life is shown in the fact that he was not merely a victim, but a man trying to negotiate with fate. His marriage to photographer Barry Berenson and the creation of a warm family life should not be viewed as mere deception. It was the effort of a man seeking stability and peace in a world that would not allow him to live authentically. His family later shared that behind his calm exterior was an interior torn between the love for his wife and children and a true identity he could never fully cast off. The most touching detail in Perkins's journey came during his final days as he faced AIDS in 1992. Even as death drew near, he chose to protect his family and reputation from the harsh judgment of public opinion. The acknowledgement of his illness was only revealed after his passing, offering a more compassionate perspective on a life that had carried far too much weight. His final message of love and understanding contained no resentment toward the system that had constrained him, but only expressed a yearning for a world where people no longer have to run away from themselves. The death of Anthony Perkins closed a somber chapter of repression in a bygone era. He gifted the cinema immortal performances, but in return, he paid the price with his very spiritual freedom. His story serves as a reminder of a time when the truth was treated as an enemy, and fame was sometimes merely a gilded cage for souls never permitted to soar. As the obsession with curing oneself in Anthony Perkins's story fades, we leave behind the torments of Hollywood to enter the proud silence of an English gentleman, one who chose to protect his beloved with absolute and solemn silence until his final breath. 5. Dirk Bogarde, A Morning Greeting for the Ashes. In the glitzy world of cinema rife with rumors, Dirk Bogarde emerged as an oasis of privacy and self-respect. While other stars were often forced into hiding by the studio system, Bogarde proactively chose the shadows as a fortress to protect the most precious thing in his life, love. For over 40 years, he lived with Anthony Forwood, who was officially introduced as his manager and companion, but was in reality the heartbeat and the sole anchor that kept him steady amidst the storms of fame. The intrigue of Bogarde's story lies in his steadfast defiance of Hollywood's pressures. He once rejected numerous lucrative contracts in the American film capital simply because he did not want his private life dissected under morality clauses or orchestrated marriages. Bogarde understood that the price of the brilliant spotlight was often personal liberty, and he chose a different path, silent yet persistent. His silence did not stem from fear, but from a profound respect for his relationship. He would rather be seen as an enigmatic recluse than let the world slander the man he loved. The most silent pain in Bogarde's life was only truly revealed through small details after his passing. It is told that before he closed his eyes forever, he personally destroyed thousands of private letters and sensitive memoir pages, a final act to ensure that his and Forwood's secrets would never become fodder for the tabloids. After Anthony Forwood passed away following an illness, Bogarde lived his final years in absolute stillness. A close friend later confirmed that every morning upon waking, Bogarde maintained the habit of greeting his partner's ashes kept in a desk drawer as a ritual of eternal love. The legacy Dirk Bogarde left behind is not just his outstanding roles in The Servant or Death in Venice, but a lesson in dignity. He proved that in a system always seeking to expose everything, silence can be the most powerful act of resistance. He carried his secrets to the grave, not because he wanted to deny himself, but because he believed some loves are too sacred to be labeled with words. His death in 1999 marked the passing of one of the last true gentlemen of the old era, a man who chose to keep the warmth of love in a closed drawer rather than display it under the cruel stage lights. Leaving the proud silence of Dirk Bogarde's English villa, we enter a harsher space where the muscular masculinity of Burt Lancaster on screen inadvertently became a target in the crosshairs of secret files. 6. Burt Lancaster, File number 100-3, 48232, and the Ghost of Authority. Burt Lancaster was more than an actor. He was a force of nature on screen. With the rippling muscles of a former acrobat and a radiant smile, he redefined the concept of the hero in the 1950s. However, behind that rugged exterior lay a perilous reality that even Lancaster could not fight with physical strength: the ghost of political surveillance and the fear of his true identity being exposed during the darkest era of American history. The drama of Lancaster's life did not come from tabloid gossip, but from drawers filled with FBI files. During the McCarthy era and the Lavender Scare, those suspected of having different sexual orientations were viewed as national security risks, due to the fear that they were vulnerable to blackmail by foreign powers. According to the declassified file number 100-3, 48232, Lancaster was under intense surveillance. Every private party, every close relationship with other men was meticulously recorded. For Lancaster, Hollywood was not just a film set. It was a labyrinth of informants where fame always came hand in hand with suffocating government oversight. The sorrow of this muscular god lay in the fact that he had to use his very masculinity as a shield for a turbulent soul. His studio had to spend considerable sums to recover sensitive photographs and orchestrate media campaigns to protect his man of steel image. Lancaster never identified as anything other than a model heterosexual star, but his fierce and sometimes extreme protection of his privacy was an indirect voice for his repressed pain. He lived in high vigilance, knowing that a single mistake in an FBI file could cause his illustrious career to vanish in an instant. The most poignant and interesting point in Lancaster's story is how he used his status to support civil liberty movements. Perhaps because he was a victim of surveillance and prejudice himself, he understood better than anyone the value of the right to live without judgment. Close friends later recounted that Lancaster was a man of contradictions, powerful yet vulnerable, world-famous yet always feeling hunted. Burt Lancaster passed away in 1994, carrying the secrets of those FBI files to his grave. He lived a magnificent life, but it was one that always had to stand firm against the headwinds of politics and social prejudice. His masculinity was not just a role. It was a persistent effort to survive, leaving for posterity a haunting question about the price of freedom within a cinematic empire full of secret traps. If Burt Lancaster's FBI file serves as a reminder of the ruthlessness of politics, the next story brings us to a legendary pair of blue eyes where the truth was caught on the boundary between an icon of a model marriage and whispers that were never confirmed. 7. Paul Newman, The Hidden Blue Eyes and the Unsent Letters. In the history of Hollywood, few possessed an image as clean and perfect as Paul Newman. His ocean blue eyes and a half-century marriage to Joanne Woodward turned him into a symbol of fidelity and virtue. However, behind the facade of the nation's husband, posthumous history suggests a much more free and complex soul, a man who seemingly struggled immensely to reconcile his natural self with the colossal expectations of the public. The drama in Newman's life did not lie in loud scandals, but flickered within contemplative gray areas. Many researchers and biographers such as Darwin Porter have presented documents showing that in the early years of his career in New York, Newman had profoundly deep relationships with other men, including the legend James Dean. These rumors did not shake his love for his wife, but they painted a portrait of a bisexual man trying to navigate a society that only accepted black and white. Newman never denied nor confirmed. He chose to live quietly, using his illustrious career and tireless charitable work as an answer to all inquiries. The silent sorrow of Newman perhaps lay in carrying the title of the perfect man for too long. There are reports that he kept a small steel box throughout his life, containing handwritten letters and mementos from his rebellious youth on the Broadway stage, evidence of a part of his life he was forced to lock away to protect his family's peace. He understood Hollywood's rules. The public could forgive a leading man for womanizing, but they would never accept a masculine icon with a different sexual orientation. Thus, Newman chose to package that part of his soul, turning it into a private treasure that not even the searing flashbulbs of the paparazzi could reach. The intriguing part of how Newman handled his secret was his proud silence. He did not run, nor did he justify. He spent his life proving that a person's value lies in what they contribute to society, not in what happens in the bedroom. However, that silence also carried a sigh regarding the fact that even a man as powerful as he could not be completely free to live authentically without fear of hurting those he loved. Paul Newman passed away in 2008, carrying the secrets of the steel box and the unsent letters to his grave. He left behind a massive cinematic legacy and a lesson in respecting privacy. Newman lived and died as a true gentleman, proving that sometimes the bravest act is not to say everything but to keep one's hidden corners intact, to protect the values one cherishes most. As Paul Newman's secrets lie still in locked drawers, we find another soul who not only kept his own story quiet, but also volunteered to be the silent guardian of memories for an entire generation of Hollywood stars. 8. Roddy McDowall, the silent guardian of memories. In the high-walled private parties of 1950s, Hollywood, when A-list stars cast off their silk suits and industrial smiles to be themselves, there was always a silent camera recording it all. The owner of that camera was Roddy McDowall, a man with the ability to make even the most difficult legends like Elizabeth Taylor or Montgomery Clift open their hearts. McDowall was more than just a talented actor. He was a true guardian of the temple, a living witness possessing a massive treasury of secrets that any tabloid would have paid millions to trade for. The drama in McDowall's life stemmed from absolute loyalty. In the 1970s, the FBI raided his home, seizing thousands of reels of film and archival photographs on suspicion that they contained sensitive materials. To the authorities, these were evidence of deviant behavior. But to McDowall, they were life itself, the silent hand-holding and the real tears of colleagues when the stage lights went out. He fought fiercely not to protect his own reputation, but to ensure that his friends' true selves would never be turned into fodder for public prying. The quiet sorrow of McDowall lay in his choice to be a mute witness. He himself was a gay man who never came out in the press, living in an era where the truth about oneself was a career risk. Instead of speaking up for himself, he spent his life creating a safe haven for others. Many of the photographs he took were only allowed to be published decades after both he and the subjects in the photos had passed away. McDowall's kindness was shown in his deep understanding of the pain of living a double life, choosing silence to envelop kindred spirits. The most moving detail was his presence at the bedsides of his closest friends, like Anthony Perkins or Rock Hudson in their final moments. McDowall was not there as a star, but as a brother, a silent protector. He understood that in a system always looking to exhaust an artist's glory, loyalty was the rarest and most precious commodity. His silence was not cowardice, but a dignified act of defiance against a society full of prejudice. Roddy McDowall passed away in 1998, carrying the keys to Hollywood's greatest secrets to his grave. He left no shocking confession, but his legacy consists of thousands of frames that speak of an era when love had to hide behind pressed lips. He lived fully as a guardian of memory, proving that sometimes the true beauty of a life does not lie in fame, but in the respect and love preserved through lifelong silence. Leaving the world of secrets preserved in Roddy McDowall's frames, we come to a legend who chose to give up everything to protect absolute privacy. The reclusive queen, Greta Garbo. 9. Greta Garbo, the eternal refusal under the shadows of New York. I want to be alone. This most famous line of Greta Garbo in the film Grand Hotel was seemingly more than just a script. It was a life manifesto that spanned her entire existence. While the world knelt at the feet of the melancholic, mysterious beauty of the Swedish Sphinx, Garbo viewed that stardom as a prison without bars. She remains a rare testament to a top-tier superstar willing to turn her back on the Hollywood empire at the peak of her beauty simply to live a life that required no acting. Garbo's silent sorrow did not lie in the loneliness fabricated by the press, but in a yearning to love freely within a rigid, patriarchal system. For decades, the public puzzled over why she rejected every marriage proposal from famous actors, but the answer only truly emerged through hundreds of love letters she sent to screenwriter Mercedes D'Acosta. These letters, declassified in 2000, reveal a completely different Garbo, intense, vulnerable, and full of longing. In them, she called Mercedes the only one who understands the emptiness behind the makeup. Garbo was not running from love. She was running from the way Hollywood forced her to love, to serve her image as a heterosexual screen siren. Garbo's resoluteness was displayed when she decided to retire at age 36, in the middle of her most radiant fame. She left California, moved to New York, and lived in seclusion behind oversized sunglasses and baggy coats. It was a calculated retreat to protect her true self. She would rather walk alone on the winter streets of Manhattan unrecognized than continue to participate in the deceptive play in Los Angeles. For Garbo, silence was not cowardice. It was the price she was willing to pay for the freedom of her soul. The most precious detail of her reclusive life was her steadfastness until her final breath. She refused all interviews, honorary awards, and efforts to lure her back to the screen. Garbo carried the secrets of her true relationships and the pain of an era that did not accept her differences to her grave in 1990. She left for posterity a lesson in the power of refusal. Sometimes the bravest act for a star is not to stand on the podium of glory, but to dare to step down to be an ordinary human being. Greta Garbo passed away, fully preserving the mystery that made her name. She left no loud confession, but her letters and her reclusive life spoke volumes of a heart longing to belong to herself rather than the public. She lived and died like a crownless queen, proving that in the shadows of privacy, one can find a light more authentic than any spotlight in Hollywood. Leaving behind the haughty stillness of Greta Garbo's New York apartment, we are forced to face the harshest reality of Hollywood through the blood and tears of Ramon Novarro's end, where the veil of secrecy was torn away by an unforeseeable tragedy. 10. Ramon Novarro, a death, unveiling a repressed era. On Halloween night in 1968, Los Angeles police entered a luxurious villa and witnessed a haunting scene. Ramon Novarro, Hollywood's first Latin lover, had passed away in agony at his own home at the age of 69. The perpetrators were two brothers working as male escorts whom he had invited over. The case was not only a shocking criminal news story, but it also cruelly exposed the hidden corners Novarro had spent his life concealing, a devoutly religious star and a masculine icon of the silent film era, who had in fact lived in utter loneliness and a desperate hunger for affection. Novarro's sorrow bore a more tragic color than any of his contemporaries. Born into a strict Catholic family in Mexico, he was always torn between faith and his true self. At his peak, MGM built him as a direct rival to Rudolph Valentino, a charming gentleman who made millions of women swoon. To protect this image, Novarro had to reject countless marriage proposals from starlets living a pure bachelor life before the public, while in reality, he had to seek solace in fleeting and risky encounters. The cruelty lies in the fact that as the glory of the silent film era faded, Novarro was no longer protected by the studio system with expensive PR contracts. He became an aging man living amidst memories, forced to pay for the intimacy he could have possessed freely had he lived in a different era. His death was a direct result of being pushed to the margins of society, where a famous person could not seek love openly and had to place trust in strangers in the dark. This event sparked a fierce debate in the 60s about how Hollywood exhausted and abandoned its icons once they no longer held commercial value. The most heart-wrenching detail of the case was that the two killers ransacked the house, searching for a $5,000 treasure they believed Novarro was hiding, but in reality, they only found mementos of a lost golden age. Ramon Novarro left no autobiography, but the police records and the crime scene became the most tearful memoir of his life. He did not choose to depart in stillness like Cary Grant or Dirk Bogarde. His truth was exposed brutally, forcing the public to recognize the true price of maintaining a perfect illusion. Ramon Novarro closes this list like a jarring and haunting note. He lived like a god of the silent era and died as a victim of identity repression. His story is a final reminder: when a human being is deprived of the right to live authentically, the pain never disappears. It only silently accumulates until it explodes into a tragedy that no stage light can hide. The journey through the lives of these 10 Hollywood legends is not just a turning of old files, but an act of empathy for souls who had to trade their right to live authentically for immortality on the silver screen. We see there a Rock Hudson, brave until his last breath, a Greta Garbo steadfast in her seclusion, and a Ramon Novarro with his heart-rending tragedy. What they share is not a secret of sexuality, but the silent sacrifice in an era where the true self was seen as a barrier to glory. Today, as the spotlight has become more compassionate, these stories remind us that behind every perfect frame is a human being of flesh and blood, full of wounds and a longing to be understood. They perform their roles for the public brilliantly, and now that the velvet curtain has closed forever, they deserve to be remembered not for their hidden secrets, but for the talent and human values they left behind for the world. Whose life story among these 10 legends changed your perspective on the glamorous world of Hollywood? Does the truth always have its price? Or is it the mystery itself that creates the eternal allure of the stars? Leave a comment to share your thoughts on the character who impressed you the most. Don't forget to like and share if you found this article provided a fresh and deep perspective on cinematic history. Your interaction is the motivation for us to continue exploring the lesser-known corners behind these immortal icons. Thank you for accompanying us on this journey back through time.